In today's world, a health issue that has swiftly made its way into the public spotlight is obesity. According to the most recent data, at least 2.8 million people die each year as a result of being overweight or obese. The prevalence of obesity has nearly doubled between 1980 and 2008, and being overweight or obese is now the fifth leading risk for death globally. But for an issue that is so desperately in need of a large-scale intervention, the guidelines for treatment have failed to evolve like the problem itself. Adopting new eating and exercise habits are certainly fundamental parts of eradicating obesity from a patient's life, but the medical community as a whole has still failed to give the other underlying risk factors for obesity their proper examination. These other underlying factors trace back to the code for life itself, our DNA. Hi, I'm Nicholas Paolino. Welcome to Obesity and Genetics, Exploring an Ignored Relationship. I'd like to thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to participate in my graduate school thesis study. If you have not done so already, please look over the consent form and fill out the pre-presentation survey. I'll give you a few moments to do that now. Hi, welcome back. Today, we will be discussing the genetic factors that influence weight gain and the research that is currently being conducted to implement this information into the course of obesity treatment. But first, what is obesity? The World Health Organization defines overweight and obese as abnormal or excessive fat accumulation that may impair health. A person is diagnosed as overweight or obese by calculating their body mass index or BMI. This is a calculation which takes a person's weight and height into account. A person who is overweight has a BMI of 25 or greater, and a person who is categorized as obese has a BMI of 30 or greater. An elevated BMI is a major risk factor for a number of health issues, including hypertension, high cholesterol, breathing difficulties including sleep apnea, heart disease, stroke, type 2 diabetes, musculoskeletal disorders such as osteoarthritis, infertility issues, and many types of cancer. In 2011, the CDC did its first state-by-state poll on obesity. The CDC found that in 2011, obesity prevalence ranged from 20.7% in Colorado to 34.9% in Mississippi. No state had a prevalence less than 20%, and 39 states had a prevalence of 25% or more. This translates to over 78 million U.S. adults and about 12.5 million U.S. children and adolescents who are obese. So, is obesity an issue that Americans should be worried about? I think the answer is yes. In designing the treatment plan for a disease, we must first understand how that disease comes to be. The fundamental reason for a person gaining excess weight always has and always will be that they are consuming more calories than they are putting out through physical activity. However, obesity is a multifactorial disorder, meaning there are both genetic and non-genetic risk factors involved. We as a society most commonly concentrate on the non-genetic risk factors, which include a person's environment and lifestyle. A person's environment could include living in a very stressful situation or living in an area of great pollution. Lifestyle would include eating habits, exercise habits, consuming alcohol, drugs, etc., and if they get enough sleep. However, what many of you may be surprised to find out is that these non-genetic risk factors that we so commonly concentrate on only make up 16% of the influence on a person's body to start gaining excess weight. These genetic risk factors make up the other 84%. That is a large percentile. This could very well explain why we often see more than one person in a single family who has weight issues. However, there is no specific obesity gene that if you were to inherit this gene with a gene mutation in it, you will absolutely become obese. This genetic risk is really made up of genetic mutations in certain genes that have been found to indirectly predispose a person to becoming obese because they code for hormones in certain brain pathways that, when they go awry, can most certainly cause a person to gain excess weight. But hold up. Perhaps it's been a while since some of you have sat down and read a biology textbook, and that's okay. Here is a quick overview of what genes, DNA, and gene mutations are. This is a picture of our chromosomes. We have chromosomes in each and every cell in our body. Chromosomes are essentially the condensed down version of our DNA. Our DNA is instructions for everything about us, our eye color, our hair color, etc. All along each chromosome, we have many, many genes, and each gene codes for a specific protein. Each of these proteins has a very specific role in our body. They could become hormones, they could become hormone receptors, who knows? When a change occurs in the coding for one of these genes, this is what we call a gene mutation. A gene mutation not only affects the gene itself, but the protein that it codes for. So not only do we have an abnormal gene, but an abnormal gene product. In the context of obesity, we are talking about genes that are involved in the glucose storage and insulin sensitivity pathways, fat storage and conversion pathways, the hunger instinct, and the food satiation pathway. Genes that code for hormones in all of these pathways, when mutated, can cause excess weight gain over time. For today's presentation, we will be concentrating on the genes that code for hormones involved in the food satiation pathway. Why are we concentrating on these genes? Well, that's because the most promising research is involved in the leptin pathway. The food satiation, or I'm full pathway, in the brain involves leptin, a hormone coded for by the OB gene, and its receptor, coded for by the DB gene. Leptin is secreted by our adipose cells, or fat cells. Here's how the leptin pathway works. When we eat, our stomach starts to become physically full. As this occurs, our stomach starts to push on the visceral fat cells surrounding our vital organs. As this happens, leptin is secreted by our adipose cells, and this leptin travels to the brain, where it binds to its leptin receptors, which are located in the hypothalamus of the brain. When leptin binds to its receptor, our brain tells us we're full and we stop eating. When the OB gene is mutated, little to no leptin is created, meaning there's a breakdown in the leptin pathway. This means we don't get the hint from our brain to stop eating when we're full. This leads to excessive overeating and, eventually, excessive weight gain. We see this in people with an OB gene mutation. Similarly, when the DB gene, which codes for the leptin receptor, is mutated, the leptin receptor cannot bind leptin properly, and a buildup of leptin occurs, which means, again, our brain cannot give us the hint that we're full. When this occurs, again, we see excessive overeating and excessive weight gain. Now for the good news. This is the picture of a boy enrolled in a 2002 United Kingdom study researching the effectiveness of leptin injections on the treatment of obesity. Over the course of 2 years, this boy went from being morbidly obese to being at a healthy BMI for his height. This points to the utility of leptin therapy in medically aided weight loss. Perhaps in the future, we will see doctors using leptin therapy to aid their patients in obtaining their weight loss goals. Okay, guys, that's it. But just one more thing before I go. Remember, you are still a huge part of the equation. Practicing healthy lifestyle habits will ensure that you stay at a healthy BMI. And be proactive about your health. Don't wait for something bad to happen to make a change that you can make today. Thank you. Oh, I almost forgot. Don't forget to fill out the post-presentation survey. And thanks again, you guys. Bye.